G'day Trent, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. Thanks for coming in all the way from sunny Tassie at this time of year.
Yeah, it's great to visit the North Island occasionally.
Yes, exactly right. So look, I'd like to start off with these conversations just because not everybody knows who Trent is. I'm sure everybody should know who Trent McHugh is, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where did you grow up? What did you want to be, and how did you end up in the healthcare space?
Yeah, well, I'm from Adelaide originally, so I spent, after I left high school, I actually got a job with Independent Living Centre, which was my first experience seeing assistive technology. Yep. Then went on to study at university for a while, and during that time I was actually working in disability services. And working in disability services was quite interesting for me because it was really, I'd never had known anyone in the family with a disability. So it was quite an eye-opening experience, and I did a lot of work with people in rehabilitation, with Indigenous communities, quite a range of different activities, and that really got my interest. So I basically left university studies and focused on being a disability support worker. And then, years later I moved to Tassie, moved into mental health. I worked in mental health rehabilitation for a number of years. Then we had the opportunity to move to New Zealand, so I moved to New Zealand and I worked in mental health rehab over there for a number of years and worked with correction services, and I was fortunate enough to be able to manage a number of youth residential services for a period of time, and deaf mental health services. Yep. And that was a great experience. As a very forward-thinking CEO of the organisation, Emerge Aotearoa. They did some really great work, and I learned a lot from that. And then coming back to Australia, we wanted to move to Tassie. We just loved Tasmania. So we moved to Launceston, and I worked in audiology for a while, and eventually ended up becoming CEO of Independent Living Centre in Tassie. So it was like everything came full circle.
Full circle.
So I love that. It was a really great opportunity to learn, to work with the team, and then moved over to St Giles and was there for a period of time, and then decided to move on and explore other opportunities and start some of my own projects.
So that your time at ILC originally, was it by design that you ended up back there? Did you actively seek that out, or was this?
Well, after working in South Australia with Independent Living Centre, there's such a huge value with that type of organisation of having a display space which brings together all sorts of different equipment that people could test and trial, and they get the look and feel of it, and there's always new technology that's on the horizon. And I was always recommending people to seek it out, whether I was in disability or mental health services or in audiology. And it just so happened that there was an opportunity, and the head office was in Launceston, and I thought, this is too good to pass up. So, yeah. So went for it, and was very fortunate enough to be given the role by the board. So,
was there much of a link between the different states with IELTS, with the independent living centres?
I think in the 90s they were very similar, but it was over time they became more autonomous. So the states began to operate quite differently. And when the NDIS came in, there was a lot of funding cuts. So organisations, the independent living centres had to figure out how to be able to operate and make that transition. So a lot of them moved into providing allied health support, which is what we did in Tasmania as well. I know that there's been a number of them that have closed, which is really unfortunate. That's a real big loss for the community. And in Tasmania, they still have ongoing funding, but it's largely a lot of community-based allied health support at the moment.
Right. Yeah. I know the ones that I did know of. I think I know more. I don't know the Victoria. I'm sure it's closed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about Western Australia. I think the one in Sydney now that we knew of has since closed as well. So it's a shame, because it must be difficult for individuals to be able to go and look, try, see, feel, touch some of this gear.
And people don't realise that. I mean, if I look at something on eBay, then I can look and see if that's going to work for me or not, and I can purchase it. You can't do that with assistive technology.
Yeah.
You have to be able to. I mean, it isn't a piece of equipment. This is something. I mean, if you're looking at a wheelchair, this is an extension of you.
Yes.
This is something that is going to be part of your life every day for X number of years. So you really have to be able to experiment and see how it feels, and make sure that you're getting the right advice. And if you have a number of suppliers, I mean, in Melbourne you have a huge number of suppliers, so people have quite a bit of choice where they can go and try these different things. But in regional centres, it's very hard for people to have that access.
Yeah, interesting. So again, to try and bring people into the picture here, we use this term assistive technology, but how would you describe assistive technology? What is assistive technology?
Well, assistive technology is really any technology or equipment that allows a person to do something, to perform some function. So you could look at it in that broad term, in which case assistive technology could be anything. But specifically in relation to disability is to help a person to overcome some barrier, or to be able to have some level of function where they might not ordinarily have that. And that can be anything from vision impairment, hearing impairment. I mean, hearing aids are a type of assistive technology, to wheelchairs, hoists, to the larger pieces of equipment. So I think it covers a lot, and it's something that I think it's interesting now with changes in technology, because it's very much morphing into our everyday life. There's a lot of things that we have now, like smartwatches that are checking our heartbeat and our sleeping patterns and those sorts of things, which there's a real crossover between what might be for a specific disability to health optimization, which I think is a great thing.
Yep. No, I agree. The difference with mental health, rehabilitation, disability and community space, audiology, you mentioned, so you've touched on a number of different areas, but is it fair to say that you gravitate towards this specifically with disability care, improving the lives of people that are vulnerable or that have significantly more challenge than perhaps you and I do?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been a recurring theme through my career, I think. I'm always interested in trying to find ways to support people who may not have the same opportunities as other people, but I think especially working in disability services and in mental health, you realise that when you spend time with people who might be marginalised because of they have other barriers and other challenges that aren't really accommodated in the broader society, that there's real insights, intelligence, capabilities, the same as or even beyond anyone else. Because when you look at the level of resilience, patience, innovation, you have to be very clever and capable to be able to cope with a lot of the challenges that many of these people face. So I always find it really interesting learning from their experience, learning from their insights, and I think that's what's always brought me back to working in disability services and working in mental health services. Is I always feel really I guess learning from their insight and learning from just that dynamic that happens between yourself and between the families, and learning from their stories. It just really, it kind of, in a sense, makes you think creatively.
Yeah.
You can't just have like a linear approach of, well, if the number says this, then this is what the service should deliver. It doesn't work like that. You have to try to, there's all these dynamics that are at play. So there's a lot of work in the sense of being creative, having empathy, having compassion, inviting people into the space, creating a space where people can facilitate their own solutions, can facilitate their own, what they need, and in a sense, trying to create a system or a service that gives a voice to people so that they can actually create the solutions that they want to see. And I always think that's really interesting, because it's always evolving. It's never stagnant.
Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? And so these people, these individuals, don't necessarily know what's available to them. And I think this goes to what you were saying before, especially in a regional area. If we can call Tasmania a regional area, I think we probably can.
Yes.
Then that challenge is magnified. So to be able to understand what's available to them? How do they make those decisions if they just don't know that that gear is available?
Yeah, and I think if you become accustomed to not having access to something because it's too hard to ask, or it's too hard to find a solution because the system just doesn't accommodate it easily, your idea of what goals are realistic for you changes. And I think that's probably an unspoken part of the disability sector and aged care as well, is that if I don't expect that there's going to be a great response from providers or from the government or from the healthcare system, you tend to cope with where you're at. And we see that a lot, especially in regional areas in Tasmania, where people have built their own solutions literally from their own garden shed rather than looking for assistive technology, because for them, they think, well, it's too hard. You know, people don't understand, or it's not accepted in the broader community, so you don't really want to bring those sorts of things up. It's a bit of a taboo subject. So people look for their own solutions, you know, and I think that type of isolation, it changes what people see as being possible for themselves. And we really need to turn that around. We really need to make not only buildings and education and healthcare so accessible that people are able to step in and engage with that space and start to inform healthcare services, start to inform social services what they need in order to achieve what their goals are, or what's meaningful for them, what's their purpose in life. So, and I think that's a different discussion to normally the discussion is really centered around functionality. Can we get the person to the shops? Can we get them their meal? Can we get them to live independently? And while those are all great things, they're really the baseline levels for survival. Really what we've got to be looking at is, okay, well, what are the things that really bring out the best in the person? What is it that really inspires the person? What is it that really drives them? What is it that's really creative in them? And what is going to be their contribution to the world? And these are the big, I guess, philosophical questions that really they should be front and center of what disability services are doing, but because of the demands and because of the limited resources, often it's just set to the side. But I think probably after a number of years working to support people who have brain injury and through the rehabilitation phase, I realised that there were many people who really struggled to regain what they had lost because of the nature of their injury, but also because of their ability to engage with their rehabilitation program. Some people really engaged with it really well and had a different type of mindset and approach to it, and others really struggled. And those two approaches really determined the outcome and how the person flourished or how they didn't from that process. And I think that's a really important question that we need to be bringing into disability services in general. Not just goals, but what's meaningful for you, what really drives you to get out of bed in the morning.
I think that's what's so exciting about tech now and the emergence of AI is that what was a limitation before doesn't necessarily need to be anymore, and we just look at communicating. You know, we communicate with voice, but those of us that are unable to or have lost that ability can now, with the different tech that's out there, can now communicate quite effectively.
And I think with virtual reality, augmented reality, these are tools that are going to give much more access for a lot of marginalised people. And I think what's really exciting is it's going to be changing policy. It's going to be changing how we approach working with these marginalised people. And not only them, not only the person, the individual themselves, but their family and their support network. Because I think when we start to realise that because a person is not able to communicate in a way that I'm familiar with, it doesn't mean that they're less capable or less intelligent. It just means that we haven't, and in a sense I feel that being able-bodied, I have the responsibility to figure out what is the way to communicate with a person who might have those challenges.
Sure.
And if we can bridge those connections, I think we'll find that there's a huge area of our community that has a lot of insight, has a lot of understanding, has a lot of creativity that we're just not tapping into. So, the future in terms of technology and accessibility is incredibly exciting, because I think we're moving from functionality to more around what is aspirational. What is your vision for what you want to see in the world?
Yeah, it's an exciting space. So how do you think that's going to change things in a remote? So when we talk about regional locations in remote places, and Tasmania, if it's not remote, it certainly has remote places, but Australia, just by nature as well, with the tyranny of distance that we have, how do you see assistive technology changing the way care is delivered in regional and remote areas?
Yeah, I think part of the challenge in remote areas has always been accessibility to quality healthcare. When you have the major population centres that have access to a lot of the specialists, there are many options, but in remote areas you don't have that. So, telehealth is one area that's really emerged over the last few years, and initially there were many questions around how effective it was going to be, because it's not the same as having us sitting here having a conversation. You don't get that same type of rapport through telehealth, but gradually, as people have become more acclimatised to using that and more proficient in using it and more comfortable, it started to open up a lot of options for people in regional areas. So I think in terms of assistive technology, there's always that challenge, because you do need to have that, there is that tactile component to it of being able to check and test these things. But there's a lot of emerging technology now which is making diagrams or plans or images of things very realistic, so people can look at how this might move and work in their home, or whether or not a certain type of or a certain cluster of assistive technology might be suitable for them. So I think being able to reduce the amount of time spent trialing and testing equipment, I think is a huge benefit. But you pointed out before the communications technology. And the fact that a lot of jobs and workplaces are now moving online, that's opening up a lot of opportunities.
So I guess we've spoken a little bit about how assistive technology is changing the way we're delivering care and those sorts of things, but is it driving innovation, would you say, that the technology that's emerging now and the need, are we seeing those two things meet, or are we still a long way away from that?
I think there's definitely a bridge between what was once a disability specific area and the technology that we work with in our day-to-day. In a sense, if you look at communications technology, eye gaze technology, when it first emerged, people who don't necessarily have those same communication challenges are using that technology now. We have smartphones, we're online, we're using video conferences. So those two worlds are crossing over, and I think that's really exciting. When I was in New Zealand, I knew of a client who he was nonverbal and was quadriplegic, and he managed to build up his own business as a web designer by using the technology that he had and having the support network around him to help develop a genuine business with a genuine need, so that he could actually operate it himself and develop it himself. And he developed amazing skill sets because his imagination was able to run free effectively. It creates a lot of opportunities. So I think as technology evolves and as it becomes more seamless, really, I think you'll see that there's a lot of cross-fertilisation of ideas between different sectors.
So in your opinion, what's missing at the moment in assistive technology and access to it?
Well, I think in terms of what's missing in assistive tech, there's so much of it. There's so much in so many different areas of the world. There's so many great inventions, and being able to find what you need, or knowing that there's a solution that's there, I think that's the hard thing. There's technology that's being invented and redesigned every day, and being able to keep on top of that And also, I think for therapists, having access to what's current and what's relevant is a challenge, and being able to contextualize the technology. So we have this technology available, but how are we actually going to use it in what context, and being able to pass that information around so that other therapists are comfortable with it. That's always the challenge to me.
Yeah.
Technology itself is one thing, but then that time lag of getting access to the people that need it, that's what's missing.
Yeah. So what about robotics? What have you seen out there that really impresses you? Is it in the area of AI? Is it in the area of robotics? All of that can fall under that broad definition of assistive tech, can't it?
Yeah, I think in robotics, I mean, Boston Dynamics has come up with some very exciting but also very scary technology, I think. It's incredible to see how that company has progressed in the design and development of robotics over such a short period of time. I think that the idea of, I mean, they're looking at exoskeletons now, and unfortunately with a lot of those companies they go to things like the military, because that's obviously where the funding is. But I think there's huge opportunity for that to find a place in disability services. So, and in terms of, I mean, some of the challenges in robotics is being able to read and interpret balance and having a sense of balance. So, and that's something that robotic engineers have struggled with for many years, is trying to find how a system can find a center of balance and be able to recalibrate itself in a way that's really quick. And when we think about walking upstairs or even moving people or transporting people, that's a critical thing. So I think now that robotics has passed that event horizon, that opens up a whole new range of possibilities. And you look at other type of technology, like when you look at things like Tesla with self-driving cars. I mean, we might look at the cars and think, well, I don't know, I wouldn't feel very comfortable about it.
With no one in the driver's seat.
If I could be guaranteed that it was going to self-drive and there'll be no problems, then maybe. But, I prefer to have the wheel. But that technology, I mean, being able to read and interpret what is the difference between a street sign and a cafe sign out on the side of the road, a pedestrian, being able to interpret how far they are, is there a risk of hitting that person, do we have to take aversive action, etc. That scope of technology has huge potential as well in terms of robotics, because if you can begin to incorporate that into things like an Android, then that takes care of a lot of things like manual handling or a lot of basic functions around the house, because you could have something that could be there to clean the house, even cook food. I mean, there's a lot of technology out there where you can just basically download the latest Gordon Ramsay recipe and then it'll make it up for you. And so I think that sort of thing that used to be futuristic when you watch the Jetsons and you'd see them on their mobile phone and having a robot cooking food for them, we're pretty much there now. And I think that opens up a lot of doors, because once that side of daily living is taken care of, then it comes back to that original question, well now what are we going to do? Now, what's the purpose of the sector? If functionality has now been largely addressed, and everybody says the same thing. Whenever I've discussed this in community groups or in different workshops in Australia or New Zealand, people always come back to, but it's about the human contact. And to me, exactly, that's the one thing that AI and robotics can't replace. So therefore, that's where our value is. If our value is in human contact, is in empathy and compassion, and is in working to develop a rapport and a connection with a person, sharing dreams, sharing experiences, they're the things that make us human. That's going to be the value of the future. And they're seeing that now with AI. There's marketing companies that have basically transferred everything to ChatGPT, and they're finding that everybody else is doing the same thing, so it's all looking the same. So the people who are journalists are actually getting ahead because it's unique. So it's that unique human quality that's going to be more valuable in future, not less valuable.
Interesting, really interesting, because there's two schools of thought with AI, isn't there? There's this is going to be the answer we're looking for, and this is going to be the end of humanity. It's the other extreme.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the same with any type of technology. I mean, the internet was going to destroy all jobs as well, or it was not going to take off.
Yeah.
And I think it's a tool, and we need to make sure that we don't become the tool for the tool.
Yeah.
That we don't compromise on what we're doing for the sake of making things more efficient. I mean, what AI does and what robotics will do is give us, rather than thinking about taking jobs or how it's going to drastically change society, what it gives us is productivity. So with more productivity, then it means that the emphasis now on creating rather than the practical doing side of things.
Yeah.
So and then it comes down to, well, what is it that we're going to create?
Yeah. Yep.
So I take the optimistic view on it.
Yeah, good. So it's not the end of humanity, no, thank God.
Sleep better at night.
Terminator, eat your heart out. So what have you seen? You spoke about robotics. Have you seen anything that's really impressed you?
I don't want to go down the. I've seen some things that have frightened me.
Yeah.
With how. There's a lot of amazing tools that are out there, but what's interesting is the mindset that people bring when they look at the tool. Like if you look at any implements on a table and you think, well, how can I use it? Well, it depends on what questions and what motivations you bring to that table as to how you're going to use it. You bring an artist to the table and they're going to see a whole world of other things. So it's actually our attitude and our approach that determines how we use the tool. So I see that there's a lot of great tools that are out there, and there's a lot of developers in the IT space, in the software space. We're talking to a number of them at the moment. But what they lack is a context. They've got this, it's like they have an amazing Ferrari, but the question is, well, where do I drive it? It can go in any direction, but that's where I really think community services has a huge value, because in the same way that unfortunately the military gives a context for a lot of these tools, I think community services can provide context for a lot of these tools as well. And that's where, as a country, we need to start looking at health optimization. We need to look at not just inclusivity, but we need to look at complete integration across all areas. And these are the big questions that this type of technology will provide a bridge for, will provide a medium for that to happen.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. What's coming, what's yet to come, I think is super exciting. And the individuals that have been marginalised in the past due to ignorance more than anything. I'm sure that it's not always just been that, but you'd like to think that it's at least that. Is going to change life for them. It's going to the integration that we've been looking to try and achieve, be it through universal design, be it through supplementing through assistive technology. We should realise that in our lifetime. Yeah,
exactly. And I think as well, a lot of the challenges that we may have faced politically and socially is because we're looking at it from the old model. We're looking at it from the point of view of a city, for example. You have your house, you have your patch of land, you have a job, you travel from here to your job, and this is how society works, and this is what you do on the weekend, and we have this bias, this internal bias that we project onto the sector. Whereas, the online world changes that. It's a network-based system, so you will communicate with people that share your values and your interests. You're not bound by the neighbourhood that you live in. So I think that there's emerging solutions that politically and from a policy perspective, we just haven't caught up to it yet. And we're seeing this the world over, where there's new technology like blockchain technology, and then how do we create a policy to adapt to it? Well, by the time they create a policy, the technology has already changed. So it's effectively designing its own system. It's designing its own process. So how do we politically grapple with that?
This is the issue,
a question mark.
Right? The rate of evolution in this stuff is, how do we keep up?
And it's accelerating at a faster pace. I mean, you look at ChatGPT from where it was when it was first launched, just in the space of 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, it's completely changed. And there's so many AI spin-offs from that.
From it, yeah. So NDIS, good, bad, otherwise?
There's a third option there.
Dare you answer the question?
Look, I was fortunate to be part of some working groups when the NDIS first emerged, when I was working in Hobart, and it was great. There was this vision of a space of co-design where participants really held the power, and we had to work around their needs, and we had to best provide services for their needs in order to win the job effectively. And then I moved to New Zealand, and I was there for 5 years, and then I came back, and I thought, this is not the NDIS that I remember. It's quite a convoluted process now, and it's not because of a lack of motivation. Like, people are working very, very hard in the NDIS space, but there has to be checks and balances in place. But those checks and balances, who is it protecting and who is it supporting? Is it supporting the participant and their families, or is it supporting accountability in terms of where we're spending our money? So I think that there's many people out there that have had fantastic experiences with the NDIS, and it's really changed not only their life, but the life of the families who support them, and also the life of the community that they live in. It's great seeing people out and about and interacting in the community of their choice, rather than back in the days where people would be prescribed a community for them to interact in. But also I've seen and been part of some pretty dramatic experiences where equipment has been delayed for a person, or home modifications especially are very complex to get right. And unfortunately, it depends on who really has the strongest voice and who has the supports to be able to negotiate or to navigate through the NDIS. And I think that in itself is going to favour certain groups over others.
Yeah.
So we come into this equity issue again.
Yeah. And assistive technology, is it easy to access for people that are on an NDIS plan? Access to assistive technology, is that, when we spoke about awareness being one key, but even being aware, is it easy to get access to the tech that's evolving and emerging?
I think it's getting easier. I mean, the NDIS has made some changes recently where technology of a certain price can be accessed faster, but there's still, especially when we look at it from a paediatric point of view, if somebody doesn't have access to that technology within a certain time, and that's delayed by a year or 2 years, I mean that's a long time in the life of a 5-year-old to a 7-year-old. And as we were talking about, with people acclimatising and adapting to the environment that they have, that changes the habits and the behaviours and their coping mechanisms. So there's still a lot of challenges in that space, and I think part of it is the way that the NDIS is currently structured. I mean, there's necessary accountabilities where we need to understand that yes, the money that is going into the NDIS is being spent effectively, but the question is, it's not necessarily about the amount of money, it's about the effectiveness of the intervention. And the best people who can determine the effectiveness of the intervention are actually the people at the front line. It's actually the therapists, it's the support staff, it's the clients and the families. And again, it comes down to meaningful goals and being able to demonstrate that this technology is supporting that. Whereas sometime over the past few years, we've shifted to more of a quantitative view of how much money are we spending. And I've seen situations where people have had a certain amount of funding available, but then that's been reduced by a certain amount, and so an example is a person might be able to get access to a wheelchair, but not necessarily the ramp that helps them to get into the house.
Right.
You know, and those kind of nonsensical situations where anybody who sees it, you think, well, that doesn't make any sense. But the fact that the process can go through its stages and come up with that as a solution for somebody, that's a concern. Because I always think, well, that person's fortunate enough in the sense that there is a support network there who can see that and say, that's not right, and we're going to do something, we're going to advocate for that person. But I've also met many people who that would happen to them, and then they'd say, oh, don't worry about it, it's just too hard. And that's a concern. So, but then how do you do that at a macro level? That's for Bill to resolve that one.
Is he trying? I think he's trying.
I think he's giving it a good go.
He's giving it a good go. It seems to be a lot of focus at the moment on keeping or empowering people to stay in their own homes for longer. You know, what challenges do you see that poses, and what role do you see assistive technology playing in that?
Yeah, I think that we're making some great moves with home design now, that people are thinking about this place as being their forever home in terms of aging in place. So we see a lot more new homes being built with wider doorways. You know, they're not built with so many steps. I mean, the house that I live in West Launceston would be an absolute nightmare for in terms of accessibility, because it's an older house. The doorways are really thin. There's stairs everywhere, even where you don't need stairs. There's stairs. So there's different textures. The walls don't have the reinforcing in them to put up grab rails. So the homes that are being built now have things like extra studs in the ceiling for installing ceiling hoists. So just having that in mind means that now if I have a disability and I'm going to need a home that's accessible, I don't have just 5 homes to choose from now. I have potentially 15 or 20 homes that are potentially out there, not in the housing market today, but it means that there's more scope to be able to modify these things to make them suit. And because of that, we don't need to have as much of a reliance on the heavy duty assistive technology as what we might have done before. So I think things are going in the right direction, and I think again is that overlap of design for the general population, as well as some of the unique designs that are coming out of the disability space. And I think if we look back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the designs for aged care and for people with disability were very hospital-like. You know, they were very standout features. So that's clearly a grab rail for a person who has trouble getting up. Whereas now it's much more seamless. So it's not something which has to bring attention to itself. And I think that there's a lot of great things coming out of a lot of the architect schools at the moment, and new graduate architects are wanting to move into that space. So I think that's really exciting as well, because you can have these really amazing, beautiful designs that are completely accessible. They don't have to be these old clunky things like they used to be. So I think that's really exciting.
Architects amaze me. I don't know how they stay across all of these different, and I'm not just talking about assistive technology, but I'm talking about they need to know about door handles and window frames and flooring and walling and ceilings, and how they stay across all of that is beyond me. So they amaze me. And it's great when you have. I've noticed that there are some smaller architectural firms that are actually choosing to move into the SDA space, and I think that's really good, because you do need to spend time in that space to see that wheelchair access is not the same for everybody who's in a wheelchair. The door swinging this way versus that way could be different for one person to another person. The type of texture that they can actually handle, their upper body strength, or there's so many variables. So it's very, very unique, and I think it's a real challenge to be able to do that in a way where it doesn't omit anybody else from using that space. You know, I think there's some really great initiatives that are coming out now in terms of design of grab rail features and how they can fit seamlessly into the wall, with a lot of designs of tapware and things so that they're much more accessible. With how we design bathrooms. I mean, bathrooms are very risky place, to say the least. So kitchen design to make those to make them more accessible. How cupboards open without having to take up all this space. When you used to open up cupboard doors, you'd have
huge amount of real estate in your kitchen that you couldn't use, whereas now, you know, there's a lot of different features where cupboard doors will just slide away, and which opens up scope for people to be able to participate in the kitchen, to be able to be involved in the cooking, and you know.
Well, it's the hub of the home, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah. And it's something which people who are able-bodied, you know, we take that for granted. So so being able to, I think, identify these subtle biases that are built into how we see design. I think that's a real exciting challenge for new architects.
Yeah, I've even seen height adjustable cupboards and things like that, and I look at that and I go, well, that's not a piece of equipment for somebody with a disability.
Exactly.
You might just be short.
Yeah.
And reaching up there to be able to grab the glasses or the cups and those sorts of things, it's just common sense. So really we're talking about universal design, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I see that even with my wife. I mean, I struggle to wash the dishes in our kitchen sink because it's so low, but for her it's perfect.
Yeah, I use that excuse too.
Yeah. Cut that part out.
Yeah.
But I mean, having a space where you can raise or lower kitchen benches, I mean, it's convenient for everyone. So
yeah. Yep. But in all seriousness, I do relate to that. You know, I'm 6'3", and washing up does tend to hurt your back. But if I could just bring the height up a little bit, it would just make sense.
Yep.
So I think there's a lot to be said for universal design. And it's not about one size fits all, is it? Because I think so many people with a disability, it's so unique to them, their needs are so specific. But can we cover, is it the 80-20 rule? Is it 80% of the need with 20% of the solutions, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think access design consultants are really valuable. I know there's a person I worked with in Tasmania. He was fantastic. He would come into the house and he'd bring his wheelchair through the house and into the bathroom, and he would just point out so many small things so quickly, and things that you just would not think about. And builders had actually built this house specifically to the requirements of someone. Yeah. And he's saying, no, the tap's here. If I bump into that, that's going to put the hot water on. And you see all these risks all over the place. But and like you said, part of the reason why people don't see it is because people are standing up looking at it. Whereas if you're moving around the house at his height, and I think it's just, again, it goes back to access to assistive tech, having people who are graduating from uni now having exposure to that, so they don't have to be experts in it, but at least having some sense that there are other factors that we need to consider here. Yeah, I think that's going to be really important.
So there's a lot to be said for the lived experience too, in that regard, right? Yeah.
Well, and that was the original premise of co-design, is that people with lived experience could ultimately have direct influence in how services are designed, how we work with different communities around accessible design, assistive technology. I mean, I know in Australia there's a lot of great suppliers and providers of assistive tech, but who are we buying it for? Do we have people who maybe we're not hearing that voice because we haven't created an avenue for that? So I think, again, if we were able to create those mechanisms for co-design, which again goes back to accessibility in terms of technology, I think that's going to really change how services will look in the next 5 to 10 years.
You clearly have some passion about this space, and even all the way back to the Independent Living Centre days where you started the journey. But so why do you love what you do?
I think I've always loved understanding how things work, understanding how systems and dynamics work, and seeing how if people have the tools in front of them and they are comfortable and confident being who they are, then the world's a better place. And I think it comes down to that. I mean, it just sounds a little bit cliche, but
no, I love that.
It comes down to that big question when I was studying at uni, and I thought, well, what am I going? What's what am I bringing to the world? Like, what am I going to do in the world? And I thought, well, I think I've found a place where I can help, and not helping the person as such, but actually helping the systems of support around them, so that they can then go on and do what they want to do. I was actually talking to somebody about this the other week, that one of my greatest moments was I had worked with somebody in mental health services in Auckland, and they were a bit of a challenging person for many of the staff, but we worked with them for a period of months, and they managed to stay in school, and they eventually graduated. And I heard from them just a couple of years ago. They sent me a text message, and they said, I just wanted to, through LinkedIn, and they said, I just wanted to say thanks for all the work you did. I've now just graduated as a youth counsellor, and they were living in Brisbane.
Yeah.
So that was 4 years after they graduated from that program. And I thought, that's, because I always think, well, that person's now going to go on and change the lives of many other people. So if we could do that, and if there are many people that were doing that, then that's the way to change the world, or a way to change the world.
That's the way, the ripple. I love it.
Yeah, and that's really what drives me, because I think that I've met a lot of people with a lived experience of mental health, of different disabilities, and seeing that there's such a different perspective that we're missing. We take things from a very assumed perspective in the world, and there's a lot that we're missing. So being able to bring that in. I worked with somebody once in Adelaide, and he so I was given his file. He's the file on the person. So, and it had red all through it. He was violent and aggressive and all these sorts of things. And I thought, that's interesting first impression that you give the support staff.
Yeah.
But we spent time together. He's great. He was 16 years old, and is non-verbal, and really had was quite impaired in terms of his vision and hearing. So whenever we'd go somewhere, he'd have his little lunchbox, and we'd go out to the park, and we'd have lunch there. And I thought, well, why don't we go to shopping centres or things like that? And they said, no, we could never go there. And the first time I took him there, I could see why, because he would just storm ahead through the shopping mall, and he would push out anybody who was in his way. And and I thought, right, that's where the violent thing is coming from. But what I realised is he couldn't really see, and he was following the lines on the floor, and he'd just be trying to get out any obstacle in front of him. So we worked on that over. It took about 12 months, but eventually he was sitting in the food court in the shopping mall. The people who were the people who were serving the food in the food mall knew who he was, who I was, and it was interesting because after about 12 months, everybody started to develop a relationship with him, and I thought, this is great, because this is actually enriching the community as well, and him actually being part of this place and being a part of this community is actually bringing out the best in other people as well. So that's part of the equation that we don't really put a lot of value on.
Yeah.
And that's really what motivates me, and that's why I'm passionate about it.
Well, I think you answered that one there for me, because my next question was going to be about what does making a difference mean to you, and I guess it's about impacting lives. Yeah,
I think so. And it was an interesting point about how we've come from people being put away and people being in institutions to making that movement into the community. I don't think we're 100% there yet.
No.
I think there's a long way to go for that to be more normalised, where it's something that everybody is sharing. And this goes back to when a lot of disability services used to be in hospital settings, and this whole idea of, well, if you have a disability, then it's related to illness or disease. It was seen as something which is a net negative, rather than, well, the disability is a part of the person, but it's not the whole person. And then that changes the nature of the questions that we ask and how we solve the problem. So I think that shift in mindset is starting to happen more, but there's a lot of work. There's a lot of legacy systems that need to change, and they change very slowly.
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately. So you spoke to me a little bit earlier about Lifehub Health. So are you able to tell me a bit about Lifehub Health? What's happening there?
Yeah, so this is, I guess, a dream that I've had for many years. And I've always thought, if I could do something, then this is how I would love to do it. And I sort of made the decision this year to take some time out and to develop this idea. So effectively, Lifehub is built on the idea of the network, that the network and people being able to find people who share the values and the interests and the passions that will bring about results much faster than the traditional approach. So the traditional model is effectively built on a structure where you have an authority that then determines the next level, and then that determines the next level, and so on. And there's always a time lag in that, because if things need to happen in a service, by the time that's actually fed up to the person who's the decision maker, it's already, times have changed and circumstances have changed, so it's very slow to adapt. But when you have a network of people, when you have frontline staff who are empowered to make decisions, it's much more dynamic. So Lifehub is effectively a business operating network where therapists and nurses can join up. They effectively run their own business. We provide all the business back end for them, all the CRM, the operating systems, the financial processing, the practice managers, the virtual assistants, everything. And we support them to find clients that will align with their interests and with their career development goals. One of the strengths of the system is that it has a learning management system. So people can upload courses, people can find courses of their interest, and this is worldwide. So this is across Australia, New Zealand, wow, US, Canada, UK, South Africa. And the interesting thing with making it international, and that was intentional from the beginning, is that there's a lot of approaches and interventions and technology that's available in different parts of the world that we don't see. Yeah. And it's one thing having somebody say, here's this piece of technology and this is what it could be used for. It's another thing having a clinician who is effectively giving a case study about how they supported a person to achieve their goals. And by the way, this is a key part of that, which happens to be this technology. Yeah. So in a sense, it inverts the whole process. It basically puts the frontline staff and the clients at the forefront, and then the organisation in the background. So I basically began to build this process, and then as I talked to a few people, a lot of people were very enthusiastic and really supportive. It sort of blew me away a bit. I wasn't really expecting that. But I had a lot of people coming out and saying, "This is great. You've got to build this, because I know of 10 people, 15 people who could benefit from this." So we've been building away, and we're not too far away from launch now, and really excited and looking forward to seeing how it's going to work across Australia and around the world. Yeah. Have you got a launch date? We don't have a launch date yet. We're developing, so I'm always reluctant to make a date around that. But we're looking around November, December this year. Yeah, great. So we plan to have it operational over Christmas. We have a number of course content creators who are building a range of different courses which will be on the network, and then therapists can basically buy the course that are written by and produced by other therapists through this process. So will that count towards CPDs? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so we're going to have the organisation is going to be NDIS registered, aged care registered, ISO accredited. We have a clinical governance structure that's built in from the beginning, so that we get client and family voices and feedback from the beginning of the development of it. So there's a CPD register on the CRM as well, so a person can look online and say, I want to do this course that this therapist has developed in Brisbane, and they can buy that course, and then they can contact that person to get supervision from them if they want to. They can even contact that person to get supervision when they're seeing a client who's specific to what that course was about. Which helps with their learning and development. So, and it also, I mean, it helps people who are semi-retired, who are retired, to provide online supervision, to provide online courses, because all that expertise, part of this challenge is that once a person retires, all that knowledge is lost, and we want to keep it in the network. So we're inviting people who are semi-retired or are transitioning towards retirement to engage with this, so that they can support a lot of the new graduates who don't get that experience. So rather than going to a provider where you might have 4 or 5 supervisors, and they might be great, but they might not necessarily be supporting you with your learning and development in terms of what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Whereas if you tap into this network, you have a network of 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 therapists around the world, and you can find the person who has the exact skills that you're looking for.
Skill set that you look for.
So the idea being that it accelerates the learning pathway of new graduates as well.
And retains the knowledge in the system, so to speak.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is part of this is a critical issue in the allied health space in Australia, is that for us to bring new graduates into services and to get them upskilled fast enough is it takes time, and there's a lot of resources, and it's very hit and miss. If a person moves to Sydney or moves to Newcastle or moves to Perth, it depends on the supervisors that are there as to what support they're going to get. So
yeah, it sounds exciting. So watch this space November, December for that to launch. Because OTs, we spoke about how much architects need to know. OTs are kind of in that space too, right? There's a lot they need to know, and like architects, I guess they tend to specialise in certain areas, whether it's assistive tech, home mods, these sorts of things.
Yeah.
So this sounds like there'll be a tool there for them to be able to readily find the information that they need across a broader spectrum of the role.
Yeah, and find people who have that experience, have that background. Check in with them, ask for their advice, support, perhaps even partner with them to support that participant. So a person can provide remote support or can check through the information that they're putting on the report, and that's half the challenge especially with NDIS is getting the reporting right.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah.
If you could have one wish in healthcare, what would it be?
One wish. That's a good question. I think if we began to measure optimization of health, and that was a central focus of policy development everywhere, I think the flow-on effect of that would have significant changes in services. So I think changing the policy and the mindset to we're about optimizing health and what does being healthy mean, I think that would be it. And I can see that's already on the horizon. We're already making progress towards that, which is great.
You get your wish.
Yeah, hopefully by Christmas.
So Trent, we'd like to finish off with something a bit fun. It's been a great conversation, and one of the questions that we ask all of our guests is if you are hosting a private dinner, who's on your celebrity invite list?
Ooh. How many people?
It's your party.
I think Leonardo da Vinci would be one. I think Gandhi would be another.
Yep.
Barack Obama would be somebody else. I think that in itself would be a very interesting conversation if we could understand Da Vinci's language.
Well, we've got the assistive tech for it now.
That's it, exactly. And I think that they're probably people who have stayed true to their vision and have put forward what they think needs to be said in the world. People like Martin Luther King. I love the story of Martin Luther King and how how he was able to bring so many people to his cause through talking about a vision as to how things could potentially be, you know, and that the ripple effect that had. I think if I could have a fictional character, it would probably be Master Yoda. That would be an interesting conversation with all those in the room.
Absolutely. That gives a whole new meaning to assistive technology and AI, doesn't it? Yeah. Trent, thanks so much for your time. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you very much. It's been great to be here.
Yeah, thank you.